Howdy everyone. Okay, so continuing with this gear leg layout, again, when you look at the instructions and you look at the drawing for the RV7, this template has been cut out on the lines representing an RV7. So the next thing that I do is I position this template according to the directions. One of the starting points is this right here. And I mentioned this just a second ago. This point is 3 7/32 inches back from the scribe line. So again, you do not reference this tip to the edge of the leg. You reference it from the scribe line, which I don't know if this will show up, but it's right here. So from that scribe line back 3 7/32 of an inch, I made a mark. And then I take the template and I line it up with that mark. You can see I've got the center line of the template lined up with my center line reference mark on the gear leg itself. And then there's another one here. Again, this is the center line on the drawing, and it is lined up with the center line that I had drawn on the gear leg. And then it's just smoothed over the leg as best you can and taped. Now, here's what I've decided to do. It's difficult to get this to lay flat everywhere. You can see it's not flat here. You can see on this side where I don't have any tape, it's not laying flat. So here's what I've elected to do. I've got it nice and flat along this leading edge. I also have it pulled snug on this corner and taped. I have it pulled snug on this corner, on this side, and taped. And I did the same thing on the other side. So it's nice and smooth across the top. And then I smooth it over, tape it, smooth it over here, and tape it. What I do now at this point is very simple. I just take a Sharpie and I'll draw a reference line on this side of the corner, and I'll draw a reference line on this side of the corner. I'll do that here too. Of course, I'll have to move this tape, but I'll just draw a reference line here on this corner and a reference line up here on this corner. Other side, same thing. I'll trace this corner here, and I'll trace this corner here and here, just marking the corners. There are also reference lines on the drawing. Here is a gear leg center line reference. So I want to make a note of that line. So I'll make a mark here. Same thing on this end. I'll make a mark here. Other side, same thing. There's a gear leg center line. So I'll make a mark here, and I'll make a mark at the other end here. At that point, I'll take the template off and I'll use a straight edge and I'll connect my corner marks. So I'll connect this line to this line here using a straight edge, and I'll do the same thing for this edge. I'll go from this line, I'll make another mark here at the top, and I'll connect that with a straight edge. And then I'll go from this, I'll make a mark here, and using a straight edge, I'll connect it to the mark that I made here. And then again, across the bottom, I'll just line up this line using a straight edge with this line, and then I'll draw the line. And then again, up this side. So let me make sure that I've got everything marked appropriately onto the gear leg itself, and then I'll connect all those lines using a straight edge. Howdy everyone. Okay, before I lay out the lines using a straight edge, I just want to show you what this looks like before I do that. So now obviously the full-size template has been removed, and you can see where I've traced the leading edge line of the template here. This little tick mark is that center line reference that's from the template, and then this is the corner, one of the corners here on both sides of the corner. Here's another corner here. There's another center line tick mark. Here is the leading edge reference line drawn on both sides, and then again on the other side, center line reference mark, corner, center line reference mark, corner. So now I'm just going to connect these lines using a straight edge rather than trying to trace along that paper template that doesn't want to lay perfectly flat. That's annoying. So I just make sure that the edges are laid nice and flat. Make sure that this center line is correct according with the template, and then just make sure that this front edge is nice and flat. Make your reference marks. Make sure the back edge is lined up with your reference line. Lay it nice and flat. Make your marks. Do that on both sides, and then you can actually connect the dots using a straight edge. So that's next. I'll get this laid out. Talk to you guys here shortly. All right, a couple of things real quick here. You can see I've got this line now drawn connecting my corners. What I use is a very flexible plastic ruler. This works really well on something like this gear leg because you can hold it from your marks, and it will kind of contour the shape of the leg so you can get a nice straight line even though the surface is not flat. So that's a very useful thing to have, something very flexible. If you don't have something like that, you can use a very thin piece of aluminum because that will bend quite easily, but just make sure, of course, that the edge of the aluminum is straight. You can see that's kind of what I'm using here, but this is basically for length. I needed something nice and long. And if you have these clamps, these are like Cleco clamps. This is a good use for these. If you don't have a helper, you can hold your straight edge to the piece using these, and then you can just mark your line. One thing that I would also be aware of is sometimes this straight edge won't lay flat against whatever it is that you're marking. So when you're making the actual mark, just run your hand along your straight edge to make sure that it is in fact down flat against the piece. Sometimes this tries to ride up off of it, and your marker may end up partially underneath or something, so your line won't be straight or it will be slightly off. So just when you're drawing your line, just make sure you hold your straight edge down flat. So now this is all done. The only thing I need to do now is take this straight edge off, and I'm going to clamp it up here on these lines that represent the center of the gear leg. So again, I'll use my clamps. I'll just move the straight edge up to this mark, and then I'll clamp it on each end, and then I'll be able to draw these lines on both sides. But you can see how I've got the cutoff line drawn here, and it comes around the leading edge and then down the other side. And of course I got this area done here too. You can see the line here that represents the trailing edge cut. All right, be right back. Here you can see that I've got all of my lines now drawn, and this is actually ready to be cut. The only change that I'm making at this point is this is the line represented by the template, but I'm actually going to cut it at this line here. When I made the other leg, I had originally cut it just like the template had shown. The instructions do say that the template is a little generous on length, so you may have to trim the leg. So I cut my other leg per the template. And then when I was fitting it, I actually I shortened it an inch. Once that leg was basically finished, I tried it on the other side of the airplane, and it fit just as good on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and make this leg the same length as that leg, which is basically an inch shorter than the template. The instructions also say that if you're going to do any trimming of length, you should trim from the bottom end, which is the smaller end. So don't trim this wider part that goes up near the fuselage. If you're going to change the length, change it down here at this smaller end. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and make the cuts. Now, just to reiterate one last time, when you do this tape trailing edge thing on your flat surface, make sure that that is in fact straight. When you tape your template onto your leg, after you get your template taped down, before you draw any lines, again, lay this on your known flat surface and make sure that it is flat and it's not twisted. If the leg is twisted and you put your template on and you draw all your lines on with the leg twisted, that's going to give you trouble. If you put the template on with a twisted leg and you actually do all your cuts, you're going to have issues. So when you're drawing all your lines from the template, make sure that the leg is nice and flat and not twisted. So at this point, I'm going to cut my modified length here. This is now going to be the trailing edge after I make this cut, and then of course this end here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this leg out. Now for the ends here, there's a good gap between this surface and this surface. So if I were to try to run this through my bandsaw, I'd get a lot of chatter. And there's a chance that some of this fiberglass, once as it's being cut, it could grab and potentially crack. So these open ends, this open end here and the other end down there, I cut these with a Dremel. This long trailing edge cut I will do on a bandsaw because the pieces are so close to one another here that I'm comfortable running this down my bandsaw. And that's exactly how I had done the other leg. So this cut and the other end, Dremel tool, this long trailing edge cut, I'll do with my bandsaw. After we get all that done, we'll clean up the edges. I do not clean up the trailing edge. I just clean up the ends. And then I'll do what I had just done again. After I get it cut out, I'll position this on my known flat surface and I'll rewrap the new trailing edge with tape just to keep it from twisting. So now it's cut time. Talk to you guys here shortly. Howdy everyone. Well, you can see now that the leg is cut. It is cut on both ends to the final length, I believe, in the correct shape, the correct angle from the template. I've also cut off the trailing edge. This line here is also from the template. So at this point, of course, now I have to reestablish that it's not twisted. So I'm just going to repeat what I had done originally. Since I'm using 1 inch wide tape, I basically want a 1/2 inch of tape on each side. But of course, you've got the thickness of the trailing edge itself. So I'm going to measure from the end, from the edge back about 3/8 or so. Make a mark, make a mark. That's my guide to put the tape down. I'll put the tape down on one edge, then I'll take it over to my known flat surface. And I'll make sure that it lays nice and flat without being twisted, and then wrap the tape around on the other side and stick it firm. And then we'll start talking about hinges. This is where it starts to get interesting, and this is where it's important to maintain a nice non-twisted leg. Talk to you guys here soon.